Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Class 1A podcast. My name is Andrew James, and as always, alongside me, I'll have Dylan Beal. Continuing our prep for Season 5, we have already done our top 10 non-spoiler things we're looking forward to based off of the trailers, the key art, all that on YouTube. Today, we're going to be going through the Season 4 recap. Next week's the Season 5 primer, and we also have a spoiler version of the top 10 things we are most looking forward to in Season 10. So if you're already caught up, like both me and Dylan are in the manga, you can also hear us talk about some of the favorite things we think are going to happen this upcoming season. But before any of that, Dylan, how are you feeling about all the Season 5 content coming up? And how do you feel about going back and talking about Season 4?
I'm just really excited. I'm so excited about this season. And honestly, I really needed to go back and rewatch season 4 because wow, I forget how incredible it was. And I think binging through it was such a different experience than
Yeah.
actually going episode by episode. And I don't know, I'm still getting like flutters in my heart thinking about like some of the episodes because they were so good.
Yeah. Season 4 was phenomenal. Just watched, I think since we watched episode by episode last year, I think I watched it 2 or 3 times, and I feel like each time I've watched it, it's gotten a little better, and I appreciated different aspects of it each season. And season 4 is definitely something unique. But that's what this episode is talk about, so I don't want to talk about it too much here at the beginning. But if you guys have been here with us for a while, how we used to do season recaps when we first started Class 1A is they used to be like an hour and a half, 2 hour dumps talking about everything. I think I'd recap like every single episode, all that kind of stuff. Well, with season 4, we're going to do it a little different because that was back when we didn't have time to do every single episode leading up to season 4. But Class 1A started going into season 4. So we have like 20 to 30 minute minimum videos in each and every episode of 24 minutes with me, Dylan, and James talking through all of that. So if you really want a deep dive of individual moments in each episode, go back and check out those. That's going to be the best place for that. How me and Dylan are going to tackle it today is it's going to be a little shorter one, kind of be normal to 30 to 40 minutes tops. And it is going to be talking about season 4 as a whole, and then going through each of the 4 main arcs, which is the Shihasuki, Remedial Course, School Festival, and then Pro Hero Arc. I'm going to recap each one of these at a very high level, and then we're going to talk about our thoughts on it, favorite moments, maybe any feedback we have, anything like that. So kind of doing a much higher level recap than we have in the past. So just a little bit of information on season 4 before we start talking about anything. It originally aired in 2019 in Japan on July 6th and originally went from October 12th, 2019 and went all the way to April 4th, 2020. So it has been just under a year since the season has ended. It went from chapters 125 to 193, kind of. There's a little bit there, which I want to talk about when we get to that arc. And it is including of the 4 arcs. We talked about the Shihasuki, Remedial, School Festival, and Pro Hero arc, with the Shihasuki arc being the second longest arc to date, which is what makes it so good because there's so much content inside of that. But Dylan, if you had to, before talking about all this, just kind of a ballpark, where would you have season 4 out of the 4? Would it be a confident number 1? Would it kind of be a close top couple? Would it be towards the bottom? What's your overall feeling about season 4?
So it can't be the top because that's season 1, obviously.
Yep.
Season 1 is the best thing ever made. But I think it's actually up there. I think it's pretty high up there just because I think it's the beginning and the end. I think the Shiosaikai and the Pro Hero arcs just completely carry the season. They're
Yeah.
just so strong that it's hard not to like place it really highly.
Yeah. And that's something I want to kind of talk about is those 2 arcs are phenomenals. And I have some feedback, let's say, on the other 2 or thoughts about it after watching through on the other 2 arcs a couple of times there. But I think I agree. Season 1 is always phenomenal. And there are so many highs and lows of season 4 that I feel like of any other. I feel like each other season kind of paces really well, kind of with the build up, especially season 1 as Deku trains, he gets into UA, and then it all ends with the invasion by the League of Villains. And there's so many other seasons where it all feels like kind of builds up, while with this it feels like it spikes early on in the season, then there's a little bit of a lull with some really cool moments, and then it spikes again. So it's just a very different experience, and that's kind of what I'm excited to talk about with you, because the first arc we're going to dive into is the Shihasuki arc, which, as I said, is one of the longest arcs, and it introduces us to so many characters. So before we talk about that, let's just kind of do some very high level stuff of everything that happened here. So pretty much it continues on with actually really meeting the big 3. I think we got a little bit of tease of it at the end of season 3, But this is where we actually get the full reveal of the big three, learning about Mirio, Amajiki, Hado, and who they are, what they do, and then it goes into having the actual fight of Mirio going against all of Class 1A and ultimately kicking his ass. From there, we do go on to pretty much learning about the new generation and old generations of villains. So we have the first encounter between the Shihasuki and the League of Villains, where there is some bloodshed. We learn about the possibility of something that removes quirks and kind of setting up the tension there, but also that there's going to be the possibility of these two groups working together. Around the same time, we also do get the introduction of Sir Night Eye, and that some students are going to have the option to do not work studies. Is it called an internship? It is work
It
studies.
is work studies.
Yeah, work studies where they couple could do it, and Deku obviously wants to do one, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do, and he asked to go and work for All Might's old sidekick, Night Eye, where All Might is very hesitant first, but then has Deku introduced to Mirio, who then takes him in there, and we had the great scene of him jumping around the room, the conversation, the initial kind of meeting between those two, and learning that Sir Night Eye knows about One for All, and that he wanted Mirio to have it instead, but ended up allowing Deku into the agency. It goes on there. There's a couple other students that do end up getting into the work agencies, but obviously Deku and Mirio and their relationship is the main part of this arc. And eventually we do get the first run into Eri with Overhaul alongside of that we saw earlier on in the season, and that something wasn't quite right, which ended up leading to a very long investigation of the Shihasuki, which had already been going on, and that they may have some kind of quirk destroying or quirk halting bullet, which is also thanks to a mini arc within this of seeing Kirishima. I am blanking on names. Kirishima, Facum, and Amajiki. Thank you very much. I struggled there for a second. Having a little bit of a run-in. We saw Unbreakable Red Ride for the first time. We get to learn about Amajiki's power. We get to meet a fan favorite Facum. But that Amajiki at one point lost that to a very similar bullet that happened in the first confrontation between the two Volt groups, which eventually led to a giant grouping of all the work study students and then a bunch of pro hero agencies that go in and take on the Shihasuki. Whole bunch of mini moments in there that we can pick and choose what we want to talk about after the recap. But ultimately, it ends up with Overhaul and Deku having a big fight, with Mirio losing his quirk to one of the actually quirk-destroying bullets instead of just minimal one, and that we learning the full power of Eri's quirk, which allowed Deku to go 100% for the entire fight against Overhaul without destroying his body, and then ultimately Sir Night Eye dying at the very end of the arc. Is there anything else I've really missed in that, or is that pretty much hitting on a lot of the key moments? There's so many cool moments inside of that, but for the overall, I think that's kind of the general plot.
Yeah, I think the important bit is right at the end of ultimately what happens to these bullets, and that is that the
Oh,
League of Villains kind of sort of turned on the Yakuza, and they ended up taking it after they were defeated, and Overhaul got his both of his arms absolutely destroyed. But now the League of Villains do have these bullets.
yes, and we do, and Overhaul is still in prison. They didn't kill him or anything, and he has been now locked up, but obviously without the use of his arms, much less dangerous. But I guess we've spent a lot of time talking about so many specific things in here. We've talked about the big three in so many moments. I think we've talked a lot about Facum on that. This arc introduces me, I've realized, to like 3 or 4 of like my top 10 favorite characters ever, which is so
Yeah.
cool that this arc, despite being so long and the build up taking a long time to get to the actual raid part of this arc, but those first like, I don't know, 6, 7 episodes, I feel like were just a build up, is still super interesting. You get the tense moments, you get the Mirio show off, you get the Sir Night Eye pretty much hating Deku moment and Mirio just being clueless about it. There's so many cool moments just in the build up and the introduction of characters here, and Kirishima instantly became one of my favorite characters too as Unbreakable Red Ride happened. I mean, I could talk about this arc alone for an hour.
Yeah, and I mean, before we really dive into like all that kind of stuff, I just want to make like a special announcement, just so everyone knows. Yes, I will be marrying Bubble Girl. Everyone here is
Why?
invited. No, but I definitely agree. I thought the characters for this were incredible. Not only were the new characters incredible, but like you were saying, like even the old characters, it felt like we met them for the first time in a whole new light. Like Kirishima. Hiroshima was like this shining star of this arc, and everything about him was so cool, and it was so unexpected that, during this arc, we would just get all this backstory and all this information about him and get his motivations, and I just think he's such a cool character now,
And
and
it
he's
was
definitely
all in a
one of my
very little
favorites.
amount of time. I think like he really only got a spotlight for 3, maybe 4 episodes, depending
It
on
was like 3, yeah.
where the cuts goes. The 2 at the beginning of the season, kind of with that, and then ultimately in the fight against Rappa and whatever the Shield villain was, with Fat Gum in the raid arc. I mean, we got a full backstory episode kind of there about his original like interactions with Mina and all that kind of stuff, and all of that was unexpected. Like after we got the first kind of 2 episode focus on him with Fat Gum, I thought that was all we're going to get. And then to get even more backstory, which was still better and didn't feel out of place or too much, was amazing for him.
Mhm. Another thing I really liked about this season is that one of my favorite things about My Hero and like universes when they spin up like this is because they change things a lot. I like whenever we answer the question, how does X operate in
Yes.
this universe? And this answers the question, how does the Yakuza look? Because obviously with the invention of quirks and the invention of villains, it's like, okay, well, the Yakuza, who is like a crime organization, what do they even look like nowadays? Are they villain organizations? And then this kind of answers the question of, yeah, they kind of like went to the wayside. They're considered nobodies now, like in the underworld. They just kind of exist. So I thought that was really cool. I really like the world building around that to give us that little bit of information.
Yeah, and that they're pretty much under the scope of heroes usually, only taking care of police, and they're more or less extinct at this point, is kind of what they've built it out to be. And then setting up that thing, because it is very cool thematically as well. Overhauls the mask and like how they design the 9 bullets, like all the character design for the Yakuza fit while still also fitting in a quirk based world where everyone's going to be a little different and a little more kind of mutated, but they still give off those very kind of gangster Yakuza vibes. So all the character design for the Shihasuki was amazing as well here. And
Hmm.
I I know this, we're going to spend the longest time talking about this arc because obviously a couple are a lot shorter here. But before we get too far in, Mirio is definitely someone we have to talk to you because he has like a 3 season arc in a single, I mean, like a whole character arc in like a single arc, it feels like here, because he's introduced. He's this incredibly powerful one. He should have been the next one for all holder. He goes on and pretty much just destroys any shitty thing he interacts with. He goes to fight Overhaul. He would have won there, but then he had to protect the person. Even after losing his quirk, he still is almost able to beat Overhaul by himself. Like, he goes through so many emotions. It is just a roller coaster for Mirio here in a matter of 12 episodes. And he's a fan favorite. People want him. We talk about him all the time on the podcast now. And definitely one of the parts that make this arc so amazing.
Yeah, and I think he answers the question that the series always poses constantly is what does it mean to be a hero? And he
Yes.
kind of answers that in such a good way. And he's such a cool character. I love his like little beady eyes, like he looks like a Tintin character, and he's so cool. The one thing I wanted to bring up because I noticed it on my second watch through that I felt like was a missed opportunity is his whole quirk. His quirk kind of sucks unless he
Yeah.
really trains at it and gets good. Then it's OP basically. But his whole thing was, like, being able to activate his quirk at certain parts of his body, right? And, like, he turns it on and off
Yep.
basically to go through stuff. Why did they not have that conversation with Deku when he was learning how to use his, like, air cannon blast? I know this is going into the next arc a little bit, but I think it's important here.
Yeah. That
Why
he is
why
someone
did
that's a master of
because
that. Maybe
no,
be,
because no, because they have the same exact conversation. All Might and Deku have the same exact conversation about, "Oh, yeah, well, you need to activate, like,
yeah.
One for All just a little bit in this part of your body, so you're not activating all at once." When I heard that conversation, I was like, "Why isn't this with Mirio?" It would have been so cool with Mirio. And I think that's what I'm getting at is Mirio teaches Deku a lot during this arc.
Yes.
He is he's acting like a really good like mentor within UA, and I wish I want to see more of that. Like I want to see Deku learn more from him because he's such a cool character and he knows a lot already.
Yeah, that is just true. That is very much, and I'm sure how you can explain it out is All Might not wanting to introduce him because of Sir Night Eye, and All Might being aware that Mirio is supposed to be the next holder. Like there is story reasons of why that conversation didn't happen earlier, but it would have been such a better way to do it. And if you introduce him a season earlier, and then no one even like reveals that he's a big three, then he comes back in this season and like, oh, I'm actually one of the three strongest people in the entire school or something like that. Could have been a little bit of a tease early on and then set up there. But yeah, that would have been a really cool moment that I didn't think about too much. But I guess going throughout all of this, I guess there's two routes we can go. We could talk about Sir Knight, his relationship with All Might and all that, or we could start talking about some of the badass fights that happened in the Raid arc. I think there's the two ways we kind of got to go with this. Both deserve the attention, but we only have so much time here.
I think we talk about the fights, and I think my overall sentiment of the fights is very similar to what we talked about. I think in the last top 10 episode is basically there's a couple things you can do with fights to make them good. You can have the choreography, you can have the emotion behind it, or you can have the visuals. And my hero decides to do the visuals and the emotion
Yes.
really, really, really well. Choreography wise, the fights are all okay,
Yep.
but oh man, the emotion behind every single fight this season is unreal.
Yep. I mean, just a couple of them if you guys are kind of forgetting on right now. The Amajiki fight, when he was fighting all three of those, pretty much feeling super confident, then going up and down, like his internal monologue, and then ultimately kicking ass using a combination of his quirks. The sword and shield fight with Fat Gum and Hiroshima, and then ultimately the giant battle, which had some really cool animations part of the end with Overhaul versus Deku.
The big fists in the air.
Yeah, that and that's still one of my favorite moments ever. I think that was the first time I had ever taken a screenshot of an anime while watching it. That I had to stop it, take a screenshot because it was so cool to me. And then just also the Mirio fight. Like, there's so many little things here. You can even get a little bit of Hado and them early on fighting outside. Like, there's just so many moments here that are all very cool and a lot of emotions, like you said. That, yep, none of the fights are incredible. I would say maybe the Overhaul one has a little bit more choreography than the rest of them, but that was meant to be a very big key piece for the entire season, so it makes sense that it's beyond the normal fight.
I think my favorite fight is actually the Mirio overhaul fight. It's a really cool fight. But the moment of where he gets shot with the bullet and he loses his quirk, and without like him like understanding he lost his quirk, and without like dropping like a beat, he just still runs at overhaul and like grabs his arm and like just punches him raw.
Yeah.
Oh my god! Like every time I see that, it's just like it is
Yeah.
incredible.
Gets
Like
3
real
to 4
emotion.
hit in against a person that can instantly kill you is insane.
Yeah.
So I agree that those are both incredibly cool. And then I guess that's the overall sentiment there. And then Sir Knight, I think it was very cool getting this. I think it was very short lived, the entire relationship with Sir Knight I mean, again, like Mirio, who had an entire character arc in the Sir Knight literally did because he's dead now. There's not going to be much more with him now, but it set up the ultimate end for All Might. We got to see that, yes, there was actual conversations about the next holder of all One for All, that not everyone thought it should have gone to Deku, and that hurt the relationship. Like, there were some really cool moments that built out All Might's character as a whole, and the whole lineage of One for All.
Yeah, I think the thing with All Might though is still nebulous, because he was like, things I see always happen and they always happen, and then like at the very end, he was like, oh, I saw Deku die, and then he didn't die. What's going on here?
Fair.
And there's like that weird conversation of like all the fates, the willpower of everyone coming together at once in one location, changing fate or something. I want to do like a whole video on Sir Night Eye's quirk and talking about like the implications of it, because on one end, if it's all this weird like willpower actually has like real power upon fate, that has a lot of implications behind
Yeah.
it. And then also if his quirk does work, that has a lot of implications around like determinism and like the lack of like human will.
Yeah.
And
That's
and,
true
and
too.
that's a big that it's a big
He
it's
does
a, it's a
say a
big
little bit at
topic.
one point, though, that like people's emotions do have a big impact on it as well. That he can account for people's emotions, so that it can be a little off too, which I think is another reason of how they kind of explain away some of it. But I think that would be really cool, kind of a deep dive on that.
Yeah,
But
but I really wonder if what he's gonna be what he saw for All Might is really gonna happen or not. I think it could, but also they could very much, Horikoshi hand wave it away.
yeah, that's true. But if you want to hear more about that, we actually did talk a little bit about that at the very end of our All My Deep Dive episode that we just did, 2 weeks ago now? No, it was last week
Yeah,
actually.
it was last week.
So go and check that out as well. We talked all about All Might, which included a little bit of Sir Night Eye, the Quirk, his death, and all that kind of stuff towards the end. So if you want to hear our thoughts more about that, make sure to check that out there. But unless you got any last closing thoughts, I think we move on to the remedial course arc.
Yeah, go for it.
So this is actually an arc I forgot because my last watch through, I was watching with my girlfriend and she watched these couple episodes and we were just texting back and forth on it. So when I was preparing for this and I remembered how much fun this arc was, I got so happy. This is such a short arc, but it's so much fun because it is like just gives off like Breakfast Club energy of just the most ragtag group of characters coming together and like having a big learning moment at the end. So for those of you
Hmm.
that don't know, obviously Shoto and Bakugo did not end up getting their hero license, and they both failed for their own reasons the first time through. So they had to go back for the remedial course to get their licenses here, and they end up meeting Kami and Anasa, and they end up having just this little adventure, just these four pretty much, because they get separated out from the rest of the class, where they have to deal with a bunch of little kids who are just all little shits. On top of this, we also do see that All Might and President Mike's were the ones that are kind of watching over them and bringing them here. And we get to see a conversation, well, very small conversation between All Might and Endeavor. We also see some character growth from Shoto and Anasa with their relationship there and kind of getting over that. Bakugo having a very touching moment when talking to kind of the boss kid. And just overall, it was a very fun arc, very short, and not too many specific moments in it. We can talk about some of our favorite actual things, but it ended up pretty much just setting up that these two now have their hero license, so they're now caught up with everyone. It was very cool to see that the future number one talking to the old number one. And then ultimately, a little bit of the closing up of the relationship between Anasa and Endeavor. I guess that was hanging out there a little bit. And then finally, this did include the one episode where Aoyama was being really, really weird. It's
Oh
included in this
yeah.
arc where he left like the cheese platter outside of Deku's room. And then we get like the random character backstory about Aoyama because apparently Horikoshi thought we all wanted that. Where if he didn't have his belt on, the laser goes all over. So we can talk about that a little if you want, but it was just a weirdly weird episode. But that is included here, and they're now best friends. Don't worry.
Yeah, I think the big implications from this arc, like obviously it's a super fun arc, and but I always like to look at arcs and say why did we have this arc?
Yeah.
What's the really important information we got here? And I think the meta thing I want to pull out of this that might not be super apparent is the quirk singularity
Oh, that's true. I forgot to mention
issue.
that.
I think that's something that's super important that like it is something that we need to think about and just put it in the back, put it in the back of your head for a little bit. I'm sure one day it's going to come up. And basically, he was talking about that as generations go on, and you have people with quirks having children with people who have quirks. You get multi quirk children.
Or more
But what does
powerful
that
quirks as a
who
whole
are more
overall.
powerful? But what happens if that keeps going and you keep having all that, and then eventually, like they call it the quirk singularity because the power and the variety of quirks is just exponentially rising. So I think I don't know if there is going to be any grander kind of implications for this. I don't know if it's something that like another series kind of
Yeah.
covers or
That's what it
maybe a
feels like. It
spin-off.
feels like, I mean, when you're talking about something that takes generations to happen, and honestly, we're starting to see because these younger kids' quirks are incredibly strong early on at their young age already. So you're starting to see it now, but it didn't seem like any of them weren't able to control it or handle it or anything like that. So it almost feels like either it has to be a time jump if it's going to be in the main series or a follow up series, kind of maybe talking about the end of quirks or how society is dealing with people no longer being able to control their quirks and turning into almost like there's a lot of different ways you could go with it, but I think it is our best sign that there could be a potential follow up series because it makes sense that it doesn't fit the main story, but it is also a really big thing set up for the far future in the main series.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting coming off of the heels of the overhaul arc on his whole deal being, quirks are a sickness that need to be healed and that he was going to take away all the quirks.
Yeah.
And then we have right after that this discussion about, yeah, quirks are actually kind of getting out of control and in the future this could be actually really bad. But we won't talk about that. So I think having those back to back incredible placement, and it's a little bit hard to see, especially since we were going like week by week. It was a little bit harder to pick up on it, but definitely blasting through can kind of see those two big things, which I think are pretty interesting.
Yeah. And then another thing that I think is cool because I don't know how much implication it has on the actual story, but it was a moment that I didn't expect to see. Was when Endeavor came to watch not only Shoto but also to talk with All Might and pretty much ask the question of what does it mean to be the symbol of peace. And I think that's just such a cool conversation where All Might pretty much saying this: there is no one way to be the symbol of peace, and we don't get to see a lot of the conversation. There is a little bit of a kind of flashback during the Pro Hero arc where a couple of All Might's words are coming through as Endeavor standing up on the stage, but it's not too much there. But this isn't a moment I expected to see, but thinking back and looking back now on it, it makes so much sense, is that there are so many unfinished feelings between these two. Well, mainly between Endeavor. All Might always knew Endeavor had feelings, but Endeavor's been working so hard, and this is just how he becomes a number one hero now, is because All Might can no longer fight, more or less. And asking that and showing that continuing redemption arc for Endeavor that's slowly been building over time, that he really does want to step up and be in the All Might role. He doesn't just want to be the strongest, but he wants to try to find a way to be another symbol of peace and keep everyone safe now that All Might's gone, which is not a question I feel like season 1 Endeavor would have asked.
I don't know. I still have no sympathy for Endeavor here. I mean, to me, what it seems like is that All Might has stepped down, and now he's finding himself in this number one role that he always wanted, and then he is feeling the pressure of everyone wanting him to be All Might, and so he's like kind of cracking under that and trying to ask these questions to All Might. I don't think it really comes. I don't know. It comes off as not super genuine. I don't know. Endeavor's a jerk, man. I
Yeah.
don't like him. He was mean. He was mean to Shoto.
I know,
like
yeah,
Shoto.
you're never forgiven Endeavor. But I guess while Shoto's in here and he gets the pro license exam, I feel like Bakugo is the last character that kind of had a moment here of growth. I feel like all the three other ones had cool moments. We finally learned what actually happened to Cammy during the actual hero license, is that she was just found and wasn't harmed after Toga took her quirk and blood and all that. But Bakugo having this moment towards the end of talking, I should have looked up exactly what the conversation was about, but it was more or less saying that you don't always have to be this way, that having actual friends rather than having people below you, and kind of that conversation of true companionship rather than bossing everyone around can be just as rewarding. I think showing a little bit of his relationship with Deku, but also his growth overall as a character, of no longer in season 2 at the school festival arc where he's saying that all you guys are below me, I don't care about any of you, to now saying like, no, we need to actually work together at least a little bit to make things happen, especially during this time, which I think is going to play well into season 5. And that's what I'm very excited about with this growth moment, because this is really the main Bakugo we got all season. He was shown so little this season, but he still had a really big moment that stuck out to me.
Yeah, and don't forget the other great moment with Bakugo and Todoroki is the glamour versions of them,
Yeah.
which is where they just look very pretty. Which Todoroki's glamour version was made by Cammy, but Bakugo was just he was just trying to look cute.
Yep, he knew how to do it himself already. But yeah,
Yeah, which
there's
I want to talk about Cammy's quirk real quick, because it's really interesting that her quirk kind of is really close to what Toga's was,
yeah,
which makes sense. Like, it kind of makes sense. Is I assume the reason why she was targeted is because it was a very similar quirk, and that if she went into it and was like transforming into other people, it wouldn't look off. It would look like, oh, that's vaguely what her quirk does. Like, and she can kind of get away with, being in disguise a little bit longer.
yeah, yeah, and that makes sense too. And I guess not too much, but I mean, I'm really glad that we finally got the answer to Cammy, because that was something that I was wondering about for a long time until she just showed back up here. So I'm glad we got that closing arc, and this is definitely one of those episodes. I mean, this arcs where my love of Shoto went up a lot. Shoto Todoroki is definitely my favorite character of the series at this point, and just some of his dry humor and interaction with the kids were some of my favorite during this arc as well. So
This is just a really funny arc.
it is a
overall.
really funny arc. And that moves into the UA School Festival arc, which is where I think the season starts to go down, if I'm being honest. It's breaking of the formula of the super serious, fun, kind of more serious fun, where we have a super serious, fun, serious arc. And I think this is what happens here. So before I give my overall thoughts on that, let's kind of go through the quick recap. Pretty much this is two different things. One, we learning that there's going to be a school festival. Class 1A is kind of freaking out. As I was like, hey, not all about you. Like, just because the heroes are attacking, villains are attacking you guys and everything that's happened, the other students need to have a normal day. which puts stress on Class 1A to come up with something that is going to try to make everyone forgive them and like everyone's happy again, which there's some conversation about that's not always going to happen. And Bakugo kind of brings that up is like, hey, just let's go out and do us rather than trying to make everyone happy. And they end up choosing a performance, which is based off of Jiro. Jiro has a little bit of a spotlight here. We also see Mirio and Deku going and seeing Eri. Eri wanted to talk to them after the whole arc, thanking them and such, and then ends up inviting them to come along to the school festival so that she could smile because Deku sees that she still isn't truly Sage because the shadow of Overhaul's hanging over all that. And more or less, Daddy Mirio becomes a thing in this arc as well, where he's not going to school anymore and he's just taking care of a child. So he's a single dad at this point. And then Gentle Criminal and La Brava come in. We see a couple, he's pretty much like a YouTuber villain that's trying to get his name and he wants to become one of the most well-known villains. He has just the stick of a tea. He's always drinking tea. La Brava's always recording it. We get a lot of backstory about these two. Gentle being a dropout, Brava going to hero school or just middle school, not feeling like she fit in. She had this love quirk where it wasn't understood. She went to a dark, deep place, found Gentle, and that's kind of how they got together. And just kind of going on, and he wanted to pretty much make his final and biggest act of doing something to school festival, not exactly sure what he was trying to do there, but pretty much go and try to ruin the UA school festival because of how tight security is and all that to help boost up his villain name. Deku and Gentle have a big fight. We realize they're kind of similar. Deku tries to get Gentle in less trouble. Gentle tries to take all the blame. They both go get locked up away by Hound Dog and Ectoplasm, and their arc kind of ends there. And then it kind of goes back to a couple other things. Was we're continuing to prep for the school festival. Bakugo's on drums. They're doing the light show, all that kind of stuff. We also get to see Deku learning the air cannon here. I'm jumping around a little bit. I'm trying to explain arcs one at a time. But he's now able to use full calling at 20 cents and 20%, but going to a higher percent with just his finger allows him to shoot out air blasts and things such as that. So kind of an evolution of his quirk. And then pretty much from there, we have a couple moments with May where we get a couple of new items. We learned All Might once had items that didn't work, but I was impressed with how May's is. We get the pageant with Kendo, the third year, and Hado. And then ultimately we get the school performance, which is kind of a banger, and the overall interactions at the school festival. So I think if you cut this arc in half and give the Pro Hero arc those episodes, this season's multiple times better. I think all of this drags on just a little too long.
I think it does. I'm a little unsure of some of the reasoning behind it. There's a lot of bits. There's a lot of good bits here that I really like.
Yes.
I like this stuff with May. I like the overall idea of Gentle. Like I like what he's kind of talking about a little bit. But it maybe could have been in a different form. I just think it could have been in a different form. And it would have been a little bit better. But like overall, I think the stuff that we got from it was good. Just the execution just wasn't quite there.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I mean, I like the gimmick. I like his backstory, but I feel like his backstory was at half an episode where it could have been wrapped up into 2 or 3 minutes. I feel like we could have cut out some of the earlier YouTube videos and moments. Like, I just feel like they tried to flesh him out a little bit where he was a deep character and his reasoning behind all of it was fine. But all of that happened in one moment. All of the growth and kind of emotions that I feel from Gentle happened in one episode, whereas the backstory and the fight with Deku. Everything before that, I had no interest in them, and all the time they spent on them just didn't build up anything. So I felt that's where I feel like some of that space could be removed, or you give some of that backstory in smaller chunks and give it some back there to kind of make those earlier moments with Gentle feel like they mean something. Otherwise, they're trying to make him be like a threat without really making him a threat. Like, I didn't know what to ever feel when seeing Gentle on screen until the fight with Deku, so I never really enjoyed having him on screen. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the cool little bit that we get is like the weird Quirk law like that we get, not Quirk law, but Hero law. We get a little bit of like insight into that. And then we also get a little bit of backstory on like some old villains from like the old days and
Yep.
stuff, which is pretty cool. Like I said, it's a lot of little bits that are really good. It's just they just don't quite come together as well. But at the end of it, we do get that really awesome music piece by the class, which
Yeah,
is
we do get
really
the
cool.
music, and it is a fun arc. I don't want to take away from it. I don't have a problem with the fun arc after being after a fun arc, and I think they put Gentle in there to try to break it up a little bit, and it didn't quite hit home. But I love Jiro getting a little bit of a spotlight. She's always been a character that I've enjoyed, but you don't really get enough time with her to ever really make her one of your favorites or really a favorite. So it was cool kind of seeing get her a little bit of attention. I like that they addressed the fact of Eri could one day get control over Quirk too. Maybe reverse Mirror's Quirk. That opens up the door for that down the road. That she's going to be fine, that her horn is going down, and what actually happened with her because now she's just an orphan. So we get the answer to that. Like there are a lot of really cool moments in here, and even the class kind of having some internal monologue around it of like not trying to make everyone happy, just going out there and doing what they enjoy. Like there's some of those good like mushy life lessons in here too, which come from Bakugo surprisingly, but it just feels like it goes on a little too long. I mean, the opener is amazing, so I'm glad the second half of the season went on, so we got more Star Maker. But yeah, I guess I don't have too much to say about it. I love seeing Deku evolve his quirk a little bit more, having the air cannons, but I don't have much to say, and I definitely think I can confidently say this is my least favorite arc in the entire show.
I mean, I think I would agree. It's really it's a kind of harsh thing to say, but if you also look at all the arcs in My Hero, all of them are good, and it's not like this is bad. It's
No,
not like we
it
were
just
like
doesn't hit
drudging
as
through it.
well as everything else.
Yeah, it's still a good arc, but like in the grand scheme of like the good amongst the great, it's gonna be obviously
Yeah.
like low.
And especially when you go back and have it sandwiched between even right before this was a really fun arc that like everyone really enjoyed with Shoto and Todoroki and all that. And then the beginning and the end of the season is just these big action moments too. So this one doesn't hit on the humor. It doesn't hit on the action moments. So it just doesn't perform as well as anything else in the season. But it is still a good arc. I know a lot of people do enjoy it. But instead
Let's talk
of
about a good arc.
yeah, I was about to say, instead of continuing just to talk about how bad this is, let's move on to the Pro Hero arc, which is really only a couple of episodes, but some really big things in here. So one, we learn about the Japanese billboards and hero billboards and pretty much how that works. The Pussycat Dolls come back, explain that they're back in action. That yes, one of them never got their quirk back because it didn't work, but she's just an office cat now. So we're all happy with that. And then explaining how that works. That pretty much it's based off of a couple of main things, and we kind of went over that actually when making Kaminari a top 10 hero. But it's pretty much public opinion, cases solved, um, and there's one other one too, like just kind of general good things done as well. Like
Yeah, like general like doing good in the community.
yeah, so pretty much those three things, and based off of those three things, you are then assigned a rank between one and whatever, and that is how All Might has been officially considered the number one. Endeavor's been the number two, and so on for the last couple of seasons. So pretty much, we don't actually get to see any of the students really go there, but we get to go through the actual experience of the top 10 being named, where we meet a lot of the new characters. We meet Wash, we meet Mirko, we get to see
Gosh.
we get to see Edge Shot again. And most importantly, we get to the top couple of few where Best Jeanist, who is currently out of commission, but he is number 3. We see Hawks, who is a brand new inner character. We had seen him a little bit in the movie at this point, and we had seen him or heard of him briefly with his internship earlier on. But we actually get to meet him and see who he is. We learn he's a super young hotshot that's quickly grown up, one of the youngest people to ever start an agency, and so on. And then Endeavor is officially named the number 1 hero. But during this, we also get Hawks kind of fanning the flames, per se, kind of revving up Endeavor being the number 1 and his thoughts on that. Best Genius is only number 3 because he was injured and all the public support, and that Endeavor was kind of farther down the list in public support, and more or less just kind of trash talking and showing that he's a very cocky hero. After the whole kind of astral billboards, Hawks and Endeavor have a little bit of moments where Endeavor's just pissed off and about to burn Hawks alive. But Hawks says, no, I want to actually work with you, number 1. Come back to me with my hometown and look into the pretty much all these rumors of Nomus existing all over the country, but not actually existing. Kind of like wife tales is how he describes it. We see Hawks is super popular, and Endeavor had a moment where he tries to shake a hand, doesn't go well, kind of showing the difference between the number one and two heroes and how the public views them. But then when they're having dinner up top, they're talking, Endeavor's about to walk out, when suddenly a high-end Nomu, the first high-end Nomu we see, Hood, comes bursting in, being able to talk a little bit and wanting to fight the strongest. So the showdown between pretty much Hawks and Endeavor, but mainly Endeavor versus Hood, begins. Whole lot of moments outside of this. Other Nomus appear, so that all the side heroes are taking care of it, but pretty much Hawks helps Endeavor ultimately destroy Hood. Endeavor loses an eye, almost is defeated. We have the moment of pretty much everyone giving up and the kid shouting in the camera, he's still fighting, don't give up on him. And then ultimately him looking like a phoenix, going straight up into the sky and doing plus ultra prominence burn, completely destroying him. Endeavor falling to the ground in smoke. And as I have chills because of how good a moment this still is, puts his hand up, and the announcer saying, Endeavor standing, he's still what? This is his beginning, something like that. In, I think, the best moment of the entire show up to this point.
It's so good. This is definitely the highlight of it's one of the highlights of the season, which is it's crazy. This is why I said that the first arc and the last arc are the best, because both of them just absolutely chills throughout all of them, and this is just so incredible. It is definitely a top moment. It's up there with like the Camino fight with All
Yes.
Might.
It's between those two at this point. It's whichever one
it's
you want,
incredible.
you like more, and whichever has more emotions for you. For me, it's Endeavor. For I know so many people, it's All Might. But both of those are top tier anime moments. Not even My Hero moments, anime moments, because everyone I've ever watched it with has gotten chills, even if they're not a hardcore anime person, because it's that good and there's that much emotion in both moments.
And what a way to end the season on, right?
Well, not
How
exactly. So one thing I didn't mention because I was getting chilled and want to talk about this so much is the season actually ends with Deku in bed in this weird dream shape with stuff covering his mouth, seeing at least one of the previous, and we're assuming other previous all for one for all holders with something happening in front of him, and him waking up with a bunch of things destroyed in his room in a cold sweat, which is gone to all the Unleashed marketing going to season 5. But that's the true way it ends, but I agree overall as an arc, what a way to end the series, the show.
Yeah. I don't know. This does get me excited a little bit to see Endeavor and see more of him. Like I said, I don't know. It's gonna take a lot for Endeavor to like have a redemption or whatever. But it is hard to deny his fights are really cool. His fights are so cool.
Oh,
But
the
yeah,
prominence burn, the spider flames or whatever it's called, where he literally sliced a building into like little chunks easily. We get to learn a little bit more about his quirk and why he wanted to create Shoto as well in this, is that his body overheats during all of this. So the ice half of Shoto is what will allow him to become stronger theoretically and cool himself down. So I thought that was a little bit of an explanation and bringing up his dark past, but also why it's needed in a big fight like this.
Yeah, I don't think we don't learn about it before. But later on in the Vigilante series, we see a scene with him, and he actually has like a crew with him that like waters him down and
Yeah.
cool him off.
So he has an whole agency for that. But I think overall, I love learning about the Japanese billboards, kind of going back to the beginning of the art. And that, like, of course, there's a whole big thing about this. Heroes are a huge thing. Like, they're all celebrities pretty much at this point. So, of course, there's like a big nationalized event where they go through their rankings and announce the top 10 and all that kind of stuff. So that makes so much sense. And that whole moment and getting teased of so many cool characters in such a short span, for me, the one is Mirko that stands out for both of us. But I
Yes.
know you are a huge fan of Wash. But there's just other ones too, and getting to see Ed Shot, getting to see Kami Woods, and all kinds of other people kind of appear too that either we haven't seen in a while or teasing that there are so many other really powerful heroes that we haven't seen or don't know about yet, and that you're going to get them eventually.
Yeah, which is it is definitely crazy that Horikoshi can just make all these characters. Like if
Yeah.
you tallied up all the characters in My Hero, it is like an unreal amount, and all of them are unique and they're incredibly cool. And you could go in. I know Horikoshi can do this. Can go in and give them an awesome backstory and motivation, and have like probably a whole arc around them.
Yep.
Like that's how talented he is, and I'm just so excited. There's so many cool characters.
Yes. So that's something I think we've talked about a little bit going for like season 5, like down spoiler things. It's seeing some of these more characters, especially Hawk, which is pretty much outside of the last episode or two when the actual Endeavor fight. Hawks is kind of the star of this arc no one knowing who he is, and even he's a star in the universe, but he's a fan favorite character after only showing up in 3 episodes. And something that I think we both agree that we want to see a lot more of in season 5 and learning more about him, because he is a cocky character, but he's confident and can back it up with skills, but he also seems to have like an actual good and want to take care of side, because he's become so popular because of how much he takes care and how powerful his quirk is. He's a very interesting character that needs to be fleshed out to truly get the full experience with him, I feel. But I mean, the high-end Nomu is another thing kind of scary to see. Up to this point, Nomu have always been very basic, but this one was not only able to speak, had multiple quirks, but was pretty much able to fight head-on the number 1 hero, and also was able to spit out smaller Nomu. So definitely showing that the scale of the League of Villains is definitely going up, that even though we haven't seen them in a while, their threat is still there and higher than ever. If there's multiple of these or more of these, it's not going to be easy for the heroes to win, because it took everything Endeavor had to beat one of them, which I think is a very important part to remember going in, that shit's not as unequal as we think it is.
Yeah, and the old wives' tale that they talk about the Nomu being all around Japan is kind of like nerve wracking a little bit,
Yeah.
because it's like,
It's definitely possible.
is it like they're gathering something? Are they like planting Nomu to like all strike at once? Like what is the implication that there's Nomu all over the place? So that is something that, like, I think is gonna eventually we have to talk about it, right? Like, why is there Nomu everywhere, and is it going to be like a big battle against Nomu? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's definitely setting up this whole 3-episode arc, I should say. It was definitely setting up a bigger picture of heroes not being as strong as we think they are, that something big is building, and that there's a lot more people we need to get screen time and learn more about, because of they're going to be important if we want to fight against more of these. So a lot of really big things all looking towards the future. There's actually a couple moments in this arc in the manga that wasn't covered here that I think we'll get at the beginning of season 5, which will be super cool. There's just a couple of moments there as well. That's something that I know when we watched it, a lot of people were complaining about, that it jumped around a little bit. So I'm curious to see how that is, without any spoilers, how they handle that going into season 5. But I think we wrap it up there. But before we wrap it up, we have to do Plus Ultra Reward very quickly. And with it being a whole season, I want you to pick 3 characters. You don't need to give me full in-depth reasons, but 3 characters, when you think back on season 4, this was their season. They went Plus Ultra. New, existing, doesn't matter. Even if they're dead, they deserve a spotlight in season 4.
Okay, I think I got him.
All right. I'll give you my first 3 so you can think about it a little bit more. But mine is Mirio, Fat Gum, and Kaminari. Not Kaminari,
Really?
Kimishima.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That Fat Gum's one of my favorites. He came out of nowhere. He's just such a cool character design. Kirishima getting the character growth and backstory that we've always wanted. And then Mirio obviously having an arc and just being such a cool character. All 3 of them are the stars of season 4 for me.
Yeah, I think my list is pretty close. I think it's definitely Mirio. I think it's definitely Kirishima. And that last third spot, I think it's really, really tough to actually pick one. I don't think I would choose Facom per se, but honestly, I would probably choose Endeavor.
Endeavor is my 4th. I just love
He
Fat Gum.
literally went plus ultra.
That's
Literally
true.
went plus
That's
ultra.
true.
So,
But no. Thank you all so much for tuning in to our season 4 recap. As I said, next week there's gonna be a season 4 primer. We're gonna be pretty much putting out some open questions for you guys to think about going into season 5, talking about a couple of things that we've talked about in the YouTube videos of moments we want to see or hope to see in season 5, and all kinds of other things. So make sure to check that out. But then the week after that is we are actually going into season 5. We are so close. So
it's here.
thank you so much for all of that. Make sure to follow us on twitter.com/class1apod. Follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/class1a. We do exclusive YouTube content now that you cannot get anywhere else. So make sure to check that out and subscribe so you can see all of our content there. But leave a 5-star review if you enjoyed the podcast. But most importantly, I will see each and every one of you next Saturday for the season 5 primer. See you guys then.